Today we're starting the integumentary system, which includes the skin and accessory structures like hair, nails, and glands. This system is often underestimated because we interact with it every day and tend to think of mainly in terms of appearance. In anatomy and physiology, though, the skin is treated as a true organ system with complex structures and essential functions. Over this chapter, we will look at how the skin is built, how different layers work together, and why it is critical for protection, regulation, sensation, and overall homeostasis. Think of the skin not just as the covering, but as an active interface between the body and the environment. The integumentary system is made up of the skin and the structures that develop from it, including hair, nails, sweat glands, and oil glands. Together, these components form the body's outer boundaries. This system is our first line of defense against the external environment, but it does far more than just cover us. It helps regulate body temperatures, allows us to sense touch and pain, participate in metabolic processes, and plays a role in the immune defense. When you think about the integumentary system, picture it as a coordinated system rather than isolated parts, all working together to maintain a balance and protect the body. The skin is the largest organ system in the human body, making up about 16% of total body weight and covering roughly 1.5 to 2 square meters in adults. Because of its size alone, damage to the skin can have serious consequences. The skin acts as a physical barrier that protects internal organs from mechanical injury, pathogens, and dehydration. At the same time, it is constantly exposed to the environmental stressors like UV radiation, chemicals, and microbes. This is why daily care of the skin is not just cosmetic, it is essential for maintaining its structure, function, and overall health. The skin is much more than a passive covering wrapped around the body. It is an active living organ composed of multiple tissue types that work together as a functional unit. As part of the integumentary system, the skin constantly responds to internal and external changes, helping maintain homeostasis. It protects the body, regulates temperature, allows sensation, and participates in immune defense. Because of its size and complexity, the skin is considered the largest organ system in the body, with both by surface area and by weight. When we study the skin, we're really studying the highly interactive organ that is always at work. Many people think about their skin mainly in terms of appearance. Things like makeup, tattoos, and piercings are cosmetic concerns. While those aspects are culturally and personally important, they only scratch the surface of what the skin actually does. Every day, the skin performs essential physiological roles that keep us alive and healthy. It acts as a protective barrier, protects changes in the environment, and communicates information to the nervous system. By shifting our perspective from appearance to function, we can better appreciate the skin as a complex, interactive organ rather than just seeing what we see in the mirror. The skin is organized into three main layers, each with distinct structures and functions. The outermost layer is the epidermis, which is made up of tightly packed epithelial cells and forms the protective surface. Beneath that is the dermis, a thicker vascular layer that contains blood vessels, nerves, glands, and hair follicles. Below the dermis is the hypodermis, also known as the subcutaneous layer, which anchors the skin to the underlying tissues. The epidermis is the outermost layer of the skin and is composed of keratinized, stratified squamous epithelium. This structure allows it to resist abrasion while forming a tough protective surface. The epidermis contains 4 to 5 distinct layers depending on its location of the skin, and it is avascular, meaning that there is no blood vessels. The dominant cells are keratinocytes, which produce keratin, a strong protective structural protein. In addition to keratinocytes, the epidermis also contains specialized cells involved in pigmentation, sensation, and immune defense. The epidermis is organized into layers called strata, arranged from deepest to most superficial. The stratum basal is the deepest layer, where new cells are produced through mitosis. Above it is the stratum spinosum, where cells begin straightening connections through and producing keratin. The stratum granulosum marks the transition towards cell death as keratin and lipids accumulate. In thick skin, like the palms and the soles, an additional cell layer called stratum lucidum is present. The outermost layer, the stratum corneum, consists of dead, flattened keratinocyte cells that form the main protective barriers. The stratum basal is the deepest layer of the epidermis and serves as the foundation for all the layers above it. It consists of a single layer of cuboidal cells that are constantly dividing through mitosis. These divisions produce new keratinocytes that gradually move upwards to replace cells lost at the surface. This layer also contains melanocytes, which produce the pigments melanin, and Merkel cells, which function as touch receptors. The stratum basal is firmly attached to the dermis by the basement membranes of the dermal papilla, providing both strength and support. The stratum spinosum sits just above the stratum basal and is made up of several layers of keratinocytes. The cells appear spiny when viewed underneath a microscope because of the strong desmosome connections that hold them together. These connections help the epidermis resist physical stress. In this layer, keratin and glycolipids begin to accumulate, contributing to the skin's strength and water resistance. The stratum spinosum also contains Langerhans cells, which are involved in the immune surveillance and help protect the body from pathogens. The stratum granulosum marks the major transition in the life cycles of the epidermal cells. It is composed of 3 to 5 layers of flattened keratinocytes filled with dark keratohalin granules. In this layer, organelles begin to break down and the cell starts the process of programmed cell death. At the same time, lipids are released, creating a water-resistant barrier. These changes prepare the cells to become part of the outer protective layers of the skin, where their main role is protection rather than metabolism. The outermost portion of the epidermis is made up of stratum lucidum and stratum corneum. The stratum lucidum is a thin, clear layer found only in thick skin, such as the palms, soles, and digits. These cells here are dead and densely packed with proteins called eluidin, which contributes to the toughness. Above this is the stratum corneum, which can contain up to 30 or more layers of dead flattened keratinocytes. This layer provides most of the skin's mechanical protection and weatherproofing. Cells of the stratum corneum are continuously shed and replaced, completing the epidermal renewal cycle every 4 weeks. Beneath the epidermis lies the dermis, which is divided into 2 layers, the papillary layer and the reticular layer. The papillary layer is superficial portion and is made up of areolar connective tissue. It contains the dermal papilla that increases the surface area and helps anchor the epidermis, along with the capillaries that nurses the vascular epidermis, and Meissner corpuscles that detect light touch. Deeper to this is the reticular layer, composed of dense irregular connective tissues rich in collagen and elastin fibers. This layer gives the skin its strength, elasticity, and resilience, and also houses blood vessels, nerves, glands, and the hair follicles. Fingerprints are produced by the friction ridges created where the dermal papillas push up against the epidermis in areas of thick skin, such as your fingerprint tips and palms. These ridges form recognizable patterns like loops, swirls, and arches. While genetics plays a role, conditions in the uterus also influence ridge formation, which is why fingerprints are unique even among identical twins. These patterns are established before birth and remain remarkably stable throughout life. Functionally, fingerprints increase grip by increasing friction and helping channel sweat away from the skin surface. They also improve tactile sensitivity by enhancing vibrations that stimulate sensor receptors. Because of the unique and permanent fingerprints have long been used for personal identification, though deep damages to the dermis can permanently alter them. Fingerprints patterns are classically grouped into 3 main types: loops, swirls, and arches. Loops are the most common pattern and are characterized by ridges that enter from one side of the finger, curve around, and exit the same side, with a single delta present. Whorls form circular or spiral patterns and are identified by having 2 deltas. Arches are the least common pattern and have ridges that rise in the center and exit on the opposite side, without forming a true delta. These pattern types are established before birth and remain stable throughout life. The hypodermis, also known as the subcutaneous layer or superficial fascia, lies beneath the dermis and connects the skin to the underlying muscles and organs. Although it supports the skin, it is not considered part of the skin proper. This layer is composed mainly of areolar and adipose connective tissue, which allows flexible movements of the skin over deeper structures. The hypodermis plays a key role in insulation, cushioning against physical trauma, and energy storage due to its fat content. It also contains large blood vessels and sensory receptors that contribute to temperature regulation and sensation. Skin color is influenced by several pigments, primarily melanin, keratin, and hemoglobin. Melanin is produced by melanocytes in the stratum basal and is transferred into keratinocytes throughout the structures called the melanosomes. This pigment absorbs ultraviolet radiation and helps protect DNA from damage. Carotene is a yellow-orange pigment obtained from the diet, particularly from foods like carrots and can accumulate in the skin and contributes to overall tone. Hemoglobin found in red blood cells also affects skin color, especially depending on blood flow and oxygen levels, giving skin a pink or reddish appearance. In addition to the skin itself, the integumentary system includes accessory structures that develop from the epidermis. These include hair, nail, sweat glands, and sebaceous glands. Although they originate from the epidermis, many of these structures extend deep into the dermis and interact closely with other tissues. Each accessory structure has a specific role, ranging from protection and sensation to temperature regulation and lubrication. Hair is composed of dead keratinized cells and grow from a structure called the hair follicle, which is anchored to the epidermis. At the base of the follicle is the hair bulb, where the hair matrix contains actively dividing basal cells that produce the hair shaft. Hair serves several significant functions, including protection of the scalp and sensory organs like eyes and your nose. It also contributes to the sensations throughout the hair root plexus and plays a role in thermal regulation via the erector pili muscle. In humans, hair can even function in communication, such as signaling emotional responses. Sweat glands are specialized structures that help regulate body temperatures and contribute to excretion. Eccrine glands are the most common type and are found over most of the body, especially in the palm soles and forehead. They produce a watery sweat that evaporates from the skin surface, helping cool down the body. Apocrine glands, in contrast, are located mainly in areas like the armpits and the groin and are associated with hair follicles. They secrete a thicker fluid rich in organic compounds that become active during puberty. While apocrine sweat glands itself is odorless, bacterial breakdown of these secretions produces body odor. Sebaceous glands are usually found alongside hair follicles and produce an oily substance called sebum. Sebum is rich in lipids and plays an important role in lubricating both the skin and hair, keeping them flexible and less prone to cracking. This oily layer also helps reduce water loss from the skin and provides a degree of antibacterial protection. Sebaceous glands actively increases during puberty in response to hormonal changes, which is why conditions like acne are more common in adolescents. The erector pili muscle is a tiny band of smooth muscle that connects each hair follicle to the surrounding dermis. Because this smooth muscle is not under voluntary control and it is activated by the sympathetic nervous system. When this muscle contracts, it pulls the hair follicle upright, producing what we commonly call goosebumps or piloerection. In many mammals, this response helps trap air for insulation and can make the animal appear larger during stress or fear. In humans, the insulating effect is minimal, so the response is considered largely vestigial. The erector pili muscle also plays a role in squeezing sebaceous glands, helping release sebum into the surface. Nails are formed when dead keratinized cells can develop from the nail root, which lies on the stratum basal of the epidermis. The actively dividing cells of the nail matrix produces new nails tissue that can push older cells forward. The nail bed beneath is highly vascularized, giving nails their pink appearance, while the lanula appears as pale as crescent as the base of the nail. Nails protects the tips of the fingers and toes and improves the ability to grasp and manipulate small objects. Although they seem simple, nails play a meaningful role in both protection and finger fine motor control. The nail is a specialized structure of the integumentary system made entirely of keratinized cells, and each part has a specific function. The nail plate is the hard, visible portion we commonly refer to as the nail. It rests on the nail bed, which is highly vascularized and gives the nail its pink appearance. New nail cells are produced in the nail matrix, located in the nail root, and as these cells divide, they push older cells forward. The lunula is the pale crescent visible at the base of the represents the active matrix underneath. The eponychium or cuticle protects the nail root from infections, while the hyponychium forms a protective seal under the free edge. Together, these structures support nail growth protection and fine manipulation. The integumentary system performs several essential functions that are critical for survival. One of its primary roles is protection, acting as a physical and chemical barrier against pathogens, UV radiation, dehydration, and physical injury. The skin also allows sensation, enabling us to detect touch, pressure, temperature, and pain. It plays a major role in thermoregulation by adjusting blood flow and sweat production. In addition, the skin provides and participates in the secretion through sweat and oil glands and is involved in vitamin B synthesis, which is essential for bone health and calcium balance. One of the most critical roles of the skin is protection. The epidermis forms a physical and chemical barrier that shields the body from ultraviolet radiation, harmful chemicals, invading microbes, and everyday mechanical abrasions. In the stratum corneum, keratin provides toughness, while glycolipids creates a water-resistant seal that prevents excessive water loss. Sweat also contributes to protection because it contains dermacidin, an antimicrobial protein that helps limit bacterial growth on the surface. Together, these features allows the skin to function like biological body armor. The skin is richly supplied with sensory receptors that allows us to interact with the environment. Hair root plexuses detect movement of hair, helping us sense even subtle changes around us. Meissner corpuscles are specialized for light touch and are especially concentrated in areas like your fingertips. Actinian corpuscles respond to deep pressures and vibrations, while Merkel cells in the stratum basal function to touch as touch receptors that help with texture and discrimination. Thermoregulation is a key function of the skin and is largely controlled by the sympathetic nervous system. When body temperature rises, eccrine sweat glands secrete sweat, and evaporation from the skin surface helps cool the body. At the same time, blood vessels in the dermal dilate, increasing heat loss to the environment. When body temperature drops, blood vessels contract to conserve heat. In physically active individuals, sweat production can reach up to 1.5 liters per hour. The skin also functions as a secretory organ through the activity of its glands. Sweat glands release sweat, which not only helps regulate temperatures but also removes small amounts of metabolic waste such as salts and urea. Sebaceous glands secrete sebum, an oily substance that coats the skin and hair, helping maintain flexibility and prevent excessive water loss. Together, these secretions contribute to maintaining the chemical balance of the skin surface and create an environment that discourages the growth of harmful or microorganisms. One of the most important metabolic roles of the skin is vitamin D synthesis. When the skin is exposed to UVB radiation from sunlight, a vitamin D precursor in the epidermis is activated. This compound is then modified in the liver and ultimately converted into calcitriol, the active form of vitamin D in the kidneys. Calcitriol is essential for proper absorption of calcium and phosphorus, making it critical for bone health. Without adequate vitamin D, conditions such as rickets in children and osteomyelitis in adults can develop. Tattoos are a great real-world example of how skin structures matters. Tattoo pigment is injected past the epidermis into the dermis. If the ink were placed in only the epidermis, it would be lost as skin cells are shed every few weeks. The dermis is much more stable, which is why tattoos are permanent. Once the ink is deposited, the immune system responds by sending macrophages in the area. Some of these cells engulf the pigment and remain in place, while others migrate away, which is why tattoos can fade slightly over time. Tattoos also carry medical considerations, including infection risk, allergic reactions, and interactions with imaging like MRI. Beyond biology, tattoos reflect cultural identity, self expression, and the skin's role as both protective organ and a medium for meaning. Moisturizing creams and lotions are designed to support and restore the stratum corneum, which is the primary barrier preventing water loss. When this barrier is disrupted, water escapes more easily in the process known as transepidermal water loss. Moisturizers counter this by reinforcing the lipid matrix between skin cells. Humectants attract and bind water, increasing hydration within the epidermis. Emollients help smooth the skin surface by filling in microscopic gaps between the cells, while occlusives create a physical seal that slows evaporation. Showering plays an important role in hygiene, but from an integumentary system perspective, more is not always better. Showering removes sweat, microbes, and environmental debris, but hot water and harsh soaps can strip away protective lipids from the skin and disrupt the stratum corneum. This can increase dryness and irritation. Hair, in particular, does not need to be washed every day. Sebum produced by the sebaceous glands help protect and condition the hair shaft and scalp. Wetting and washing hair too frequently can remove these natural oils, leading to dryness, frizz, and breakage. For most people, washing hair a few times a week is sufficient, although frequency should be adjusted based on hair type, physical activity, and environmental exposure. When we step back and look at the integumentary system as a whole, it becomes clear why the skin is so essential and why the largest organ system in the body and is made up of multiple layers, cell types, and accessory structures that work together. The skin protects us, helps regulate internal conditions, allows us to sense the world, and participate in key metabolic processes. It's constantly interacting with the environment while maintaining internal stability. Understanding the structure and function of the skin sets the foundation for appreciating how the body responds to both everyday challenges and clinical conditions.